You are making the world a better place by listening to the Joy of Living podcast. This is your guide to achieving a more purposeful, powerful, and positive life. Join Barry Shore in unlocking the best version of you and becoming happier, healthier, and wealthier. And now, here's your ambassador of joy, Barry Shore.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Maybe good-looking, because you're always looking for and finding the good. You found good in abundance because you tune in consciously and conscientiously to the joy of living. With your humble host, Barry Shore, the ambassador of joy. Notice I didn't say the ambassador of joy. It's the ambassador of joy. And you've tuned in today for one reason only. Because you know, in this show, we discuss the three fundamentals of life. And when you use these three fundamentals of life, you will be happier, healthier, and wealthier. Who doesn't want that? Now, of course, these three fundamentals are, number one, life. Your life has purpose. You lead a purpose-driven life. Number two happens. That's good number two. You go mad. MAD stands for make a difference. And number three is to unlock the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms. And the result is you'll be happier, healthier, and wealthier. Now, a simple example. The word joy. Joy is an acronym that stands for Journey of You. Because remember, this show is really about you. All about you becoming the best you, because when you're the best you make the world a better place, build more bridges of harmony, create more joy, happiness, peace, and love. Now, today, I will tell you, is going to be a unique experience, an exception to the way we usually do the joy of living. First, I introduce about me. And I'll tell you just very briefly today, because really this show is about one of the great beings of the world who just left us recently. His name is David Horowitz. May his name be for a blessing. David Horowitz was 86 years old when he left. He was born in 1939. He left this year, 2025. And he was one of the primary people that was the patron saint, as it were, of the conservative movement in the United States of America, and enabled people through his writings, through his Freedom Center, and his ability to speak and articulate, as you're going to meet today, one of his dear friends and also a person, a great speaker and author, Evan Sayet. David was able to speak to people and allow them to see and understand that the United States of America is, as Abraham Lincoln said, the last best hope for freedom in this world, on this planet, the United States of America. And during the past 30, 40, 50 years has been under attack, yes, under attack by malign forces, the radical left, or even what they call the progressive left in the United States, and over the past 20 years, making concert with radical Islam, which seeks to destroy Western civilization. Now, you don't take my word for it. That's what they say. So the unfortunate, unholy alliance of these two malign forces has created the difficulties that we face today in the 21st century, in the year 2025, and making sure that we recognize that what David Horowitz wrote about is relevant at this moment and will be relevant for decades to come until these malign forces, and again, malign means evil, are defeated. And defeated they must be. So I'm just going to give you a brief story about me. One of the reasons you tune in, of course, is because we're not just talking about information here. Information is readily available on the internet. And I urge everybody to look at the show notes, again, about David Horowitz and about Evan Sayet, who you'll meet in a few minutes. David has passed. Evan is very much alive, and we're glad he is. You look at the show notes and just be aware and avail yourself of the opportunity to explore the worlds that have been opened up through these great writings. But again, a brief story about me, because that's why you're tuned in. You heard about the Joy of Living show, Barry Shore. Imagine, if you can, I was standing up in the morning, completely healthy and hardy. This was 21 years ago, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. And in the evening, I was in the hospital, totally, completely paralyzed, my neck down, nothing in my body moved. I was only able to communicate by blinking my eyes. And it was not the result of an automobile accident. It was not the result of a spinal injury. It was a rare disease, which I never heard of the day before. Took over my body and rendered me what's called quadriplegic. Nothing moved, communicating by my eyes, by blinking. I was 144 days in the hospital. I was in a hospital bed in my own home for 2 years. I couldn't move. I was in a wheelchair for 4 years. I had braces on both my legs, my hips, my ankles. That was progress. Thank God today I'm able to be vertical and ambulatory with the help of a 7-foot walking wand. So I'm a triped, not a biped. Can't walk up a stair by myself. Can't walk up a curb by myself. I have help 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, you hear my voice. Positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant, all because of one word. One word. A great word that will, again, open up and learn the secrets of words. Smile. Because SMILE is an acronym that stands for Seeing Miracles in Life Every Day. That's it. When you're open to seeing miracles, you know what's going to happen? You'll see them. One of the great miracles, by the way, I'm going to wax political for the moment. One of the great miracles happened in November of 2024. Our country was on the brink of disaster. Now, not in the mindset of radical lefties and Democrats, most Democrats. They thought things were moving along swimmingly. However, most of the country didn't, and used their vote purposely, positively, powerfully, pleasantly, in my humble opinion, to elect not just Donald J. Trump, the human, everything that he was standing for and bringing along with him, which is the ability to smash the radical left and radical Islam and bring about a renaissance or a renaissance for America. Okay, we call it Make America Great Again. The ability to use these magnificent assets that we have in the United States of America, which is the people of the United States of America, to bring about the conservative evolution or revolution, as you want to say, that is really part and parcel of America. So we dodged the bullet, and we have now the opportunity to bring about this flow of energy. And there are a few people in the world that can speak about this flow of energy better than the amazing, the wonderful, the always pleasant and informative Evan Sayet.
Hey, Barry.
517,922 people around the world.
Well, that is wonderful. I don't know why you lied to them and said always pleasant. It's just not true.
Well, I was talking about me.
Okay.
Okay. So Evan's name, his last name, speaks about him because it says say it. So he's going to say it. So I'm going to ask him just to begin the process today to wax a little bit eloquent. And if you be so kind, give us some insights, first of all, about David, the person, and something that you mentioned to me before we began the program about something that's really unique about the United States of America and a little place, well, in the corner of America called Southern California a few decades ago.
Well, yeah, it was about 20 years ago, and for 10 years or more, people don't realize this. They think of LA as left-wing and radical, and perhaps it is. But for that period of time, Los Angeles was the intellectual hub of modern conservatism. I mean, think about this. We had Andrew Breitbart and eventually the whole, Breitbart company. We had Dennis Prager and eventually PragerU. We had a thing called the American Freedom Alliance. We had everybody from Salem Communications, every radio host lived there. We had other organizations like FOA, Friends of Abe. And not far away were people like Victor Davis Hanson. And of course, smack dab in the middle was David Horowitz and the Freedom Center.
I want to put you on pause for a moment because here's a podcast that will be listened to for decades, maybe even centuries from now. So let's give it some dates. Are we talking about what years are you referencing so that people have a stamp?
Well, I know for myself, because I grew up a New York City born liberal Jew, and then I was in the entertainment business in Hollywood. So for a good part of my young life and into my young adulthood, I was a Democrat. I voted Democrat. I didn't do so because I was on the political left, like David Horowitz, who was raised as a communist. He was raised in a communist household by literal activists, hardcore, declared, practicing communists, and he referred to himself as like being like Tiger Woods, in that Tiger Woods was raised to be the world's greatest golfer. That was the plan from day one, and the parents did everything to ensure it. Well, in David's young life, he was raised to be the world's best communist, and his parents did everything in raising him to ensure that he was.
Okay, again, let's go back.
Right, so for me, I call myself a 9/13 Republican, not because 9/11 didn't actually surprise me. Even as a brain-dead liberal, I knew that the same people who were murdering the Jews of Israel for no other reason that they were the closest infidels would, when they could get across those giant oceans, come and attack the big infidel. What surprised me were my liberal friends in the entertainment industry and elsewhere, and their response to 9/11, the idea that we deserved it, that, not much different than their response to October 7th in the Middle East.
Okay, let's go back to my question.
Yeah, I thought this was.
What years did you see?
Okay,
so in Southern California.
So 2001 is when I personally changed and began to reach out to Republican clubs, and throughout 2002 is when I began to be respected and embraced by the larger organizations and the better known people. So 2002 through at least 2020.
Okay, so that's you. I think, and I'm saying because David founded the Freedom Center in 1988.
Right. And so he was already well established. Dennis Prager was already well established.
And Andrew Breitbart was already established.
Barely established. I mean, I stood... Andrew was my contemporary, whereas David and Dennis they weren't emeritus. They were very, 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 very active, but they were long time. They were already there, already established. I forget what you called David earlier, but the Godfather or something along those lines.
Because he's Jewish, patron saint.
So the patron, right? The patron saint. And
one moment, let's give it a date stamp. And let's use 1988 as a foundational stone, like 1620 of the Pilgrims landed.
Okay, fair enough.
1988 through, let's say, the year 2010, it was, like you said, a hub of activity of conservatism, as opposed to what we're seeing now, which is off the cliff leftism. Now, I want to make mention of one other thing because you said these great names, Dennis Prager, who, by the way, needs our prayers, and Andrew Breitbart. David Horowitz has passed on. And there was another interesting piece that you mentioned, also coming from Los Angeles. Most of the people you talked about, by the way, were born in New York and relocated to Southern California, either because they were in the entertainment industry or because some great force enabled them to come there after leaving the East Coast and left coast, coming to what was then conservative land, as like you said, David. And amongst the rising stars, who is now an important beacon, was Ben Shapiro.
Indeed. I apologize because he belonged smack dab in the middle there as well.
And he was a generation. He was the next generation.
Except that he was already well known when he was 14, 15, 16 years old. Especially we in Southern California at the San Fernando Valley Republican Club, I do believe we chipped in to help pay for his schooling.
So again, people who are listening, and and this is a special program. It's especially dedicated to David Horowitz. May his soul continue to soar in heaven and look over us. We have people listening from all over the world, Evan. And most people listening, whether they're in Pakistan or Bangladesh or in the middle of the Congo, throughout Latin America. Now, thank God, Argentina is waking up, but other places have not. And everybody wants to hear and understand and be an American, even that they can't physically be here. They want to know what that beacon of freedom is all about. In other words, what you're articulating is that these great names weren't just beings here. They were actively writing, producing material. As you said, Dennis Prager is an example on his radio show, Prager University, which is a real shift in the paradigm of education when it comes to making people aware of things. I'm going to read out during our time together. David Horowitz wrote and published 34 books. It's almost as if, and it was, when he went from being what you accurately describe as a dyed-in-the-wool red doper baby, a communist, raised to be a communist, and participated as a communist.
Beyond just participated, he was a big name. He was smack dab in the middle of that 60s radical, and not just radical, but violently radical. You know, I mean, his dear friend was Huey Long of the Black Panthers. In fact, one of the things.
Anyway, it's funny you said that. It's actually Huey Newton.
I'm sorry. Indeed. I was just trying so hard not to say Huey Lewis because I was trying so hard. Yes, sir. Huey Newton
this is really
of the Black Panthers.
Because one of the books that really helped shift people's attention was a book that David wrote early on called Radical Son, A Generational Odyssey. And it began to explain to people his background. And as you said, Evan, so eloquently, he was deep. He was the editor of Ramparts magazine. You could not get, even in today's world, it would be considered a, lefty magazine like Mother Jones. All those things came out of Ramparts.
Oh, indeed. But Rampart was even further because that radicalism hadn't yet gone underground. It hadn't yet, the story of the 60s basically was these radicals came along and they wanted to foment a violent revolution.
Right.
I mean,
David was part of that.
David was smack dab in the middle of it. All right. And one of the organizations that he was close with, you don't identify him with it specifically, but the terrorist group, the Weather Underground, with William Ayres and his wife, Bernadine Dorn, Ayres' wife, Bernadine Dorn, took to the steps, stepped in front of a bank of microphones and said, "Hi, I'm Bernadine Dorn, and I'm going to read to you a declaration of war."
And just to put it in perspective, these two-legged beings posing as human are still alive, living in Chicago, and they were close, very close, with a man named Barack Obama.
Indeed, and just as frightening, for many, many, many years, they were university professors, which and not because they had learned their lesson like David had, not because they changed their politics, their ideology. The only thing they'd done is change their methods. They'd gone from active bombers, literally people who set off bombs, to people who threw rhetorical bombs, but did so under the color of authority as college professors. So they went on to, they went from street thugs to intellectual thugs, but nonetheless, they never once changed their goal, which was to overthrow the United States.
Okay, on this high note, overthrow the United States of America, and these people are not kidding, and they are malicious and evil and wicked. I just want to mention we are capitalists and we love it. They're communists and we don't love them. We have sponsors for our shows. So we're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back we wouldn't have these sponsors. We didn't think they're worthy of your time and attention. So we'll be right back after this brief message. Don't go away.
Hello, skincare connoisseurs. If you think you have tried everything in skincare, you are going to love what I am about to tell you. I'm pharmacist Benjamin I. Fuchs. I'm a dermatology pharmacist. And what I've discovered in my compounding pharmacy after decades of working with patients with skin traumas and skin diseases is the missing link in skincare is topical essential nutrition. And because of this missing link, we're not maximizing the potential of topical skincare. We're leaving skin beauty and skin health on the table. And that's why I formulated my Truth Treatments. Listen, the skin's an organ. It needs and wants and craves nutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, and plant-derived minerals, and now it can get them in super high concentrations in my Truth Treatments. Originally formulated for dermatologists and their patients, now they're available to you. Check them out today at truthtreatments.com, and I know you are going to love the truth.
Good day. Beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. I mean, good-looking. So I was looking for and finding the good. We found good in abundance. His name is Evan Sayet. I'm pronouncing it that way, Evan, because he's talking about the evolution of a dyed-in-the-wool, red diaper baby communist who really wanted to overthrow the United States of America and its evil ways, until he was able to look at himself, and because, unfortunately, of the murder of a dear friend of his, really examined his life, was able to turn it around, and this same David Horowitz, who was an avowed communist, became the father, the patron saint, the driving force of the conservative movement in the United States of America, which, thank God, is taking root, is educating people, and in my humble opinion, enabled Donald J. Trump to regain the White House. If it wasn't for David's writings, and I'll give you an example because Evan just left one before the break. We were talking about college teachers, not professors. Well, they are professors. One of the books that David wrote, and again, he wrote 34. I won't read them all, although I might read many of them. This was called The Professor's 101 Most Dangerous Academics. And then, of course, he mentions the people that Evan just talked about, Ayers and Dornan. But the point here is deep. And David uncovered the reality of life that on college campuses, and this was done with malice aforethought, unlike what Abraham Lincoln said, it was certainly malice aforethought and hurt to all. The ratio of people who were not just Democrats, but leftists on campus, ratio of those to Republicans was a factor of at least 10 to 1.
Right, and don't make the mistake, and I know you're not, but of thinking they were simply Democrats, as in they were centrist Democrats. So they were 2% more to the left than a Republican. They were radical leftists. And if somehow they weren't radical leftists but still had their job, it was because they refused to speak up. Because if they were to speak up, they would instantly be purged from the system. This intimidation tactics, lots of intimidation tactics, and there was a book written that was sort of their battle plan, their war manual called Rules for Radicals, and this book was about nothing other than what devious tricks can one employ in order to gain power. And this was a book that was Hillary Clinton wrote her senior thesis on how much she loved it, how great this man, Saul Alinsky, was. Barack Obama was steeped in Alinskyite the works, and he knew how to use these rules. And they weren't, hey, this is how you make the world better. It was the inverse of Machiavelli. Machiavelli was all about how to retain power through any means necessary. This was how to first gain power through any means necessary. And of course, raising the children, raising them through the institutions that you control. And in fact, they said when they lost the physical war, they actually tried to wage war against America. And they failed because they couldn't get anybody to join their revolution. Even though there were real oppressions then, Jim Crow, they still couldn't get blacks to join. Even though Jews weren't allowed into university, they still couldn't get Jews because these people knew the real world and knew, as bad as things may be in America, it's still better by far than any place else and always getting better. In my own book, I tell a story about Muhammad Ali. And in exactly this context, I tell the story about Muhammad Ali, who had a big fight in Africa, and he went over and spent a month. He set up his training camp over in Africa. And when he got back to the press, the media asked him, hey, what'd you think of the continent of your ancestors? What'd you think of Africa? And Muhammad Ali said, quote, "Thank God my granddaddy got on that boat." So they couldn't get anybody to join. They couldn't get anybody to join their revolution. So they went underground and started to take over the institutions slowly. They called it the Long March through the institutions.
Which, by the way, just to be, again, people around the world are listening. Most everybody listening to us is under the age of 35. So unfortunately, a lot of the references we will use don't mean anything. The Long March is a direct quote from Mao Zedong, and the ability for people in America. God, we're talking about Americans, mostly born here, even though we've brought in some, unfortunately, born here, raised here, who want to overthrow the system. They hate America. I'm using this word very carefully. They hate America, what they think America is.
Well, they hate Western civilization in general. And you can see that the same battle has been taking place in Western Europe. And they're even more far gone than we are at this point.
Right. I want to go back to,
yes, sir.
This show is really about,
yes, sir,
a tribute to David Horowitz, who for, let's say, 35 to 37 years of his life, which was, he died at the age of 86, so almost half his life, was dedicated to doing penance for what he did during the 60s and 70s, recognizing the error of his ways, and doing everything he could by publishing books, by having the Freedom Center, by speaking whenever he could about what is happening and making people aware of it. The Evan is a remarkable spokesperson. He's a gifted writer. He's a gifted raconteur. He makes people laugh. And when you make people laugh, you can get their attention. David was less about that than making people aware that, in fact, there was great evil happening in the institutions that people revered. What are they called? Colleges.
Indeed, and beyond. And okay, so David was important to this movement for three particular reasons. One is how early he came in. You can talk about Prager and he were early on, whereas Ben Shapiro came later, Evan Sayet came later, Andrew Breitbart came later. So you have, look, it's much more important to have somebody who was one of them expose the realities about them than it is to have me. It's like today, it's much more important that Bill Maher is calling them out than I'm calling them out. And so there was that, there was how, and then he had the strength of 1,000 men. I mean, he was determined. He never rested. Whenever somebody would call the Freedom Center, David Horowitz's Freedom Center, whenever they would call that a think tank, which is sort of what it started out as, putting out papers and books and whatnot, he would correct them. He said, "I don't want a think tank. We think too much. This is a battle tank." And so you had a man who knew what was going on from the inside. You had one of them now speaking against them, which is a big deal, of course. And then you had a man, and plus add to that his brilliance, add to that a determination. My goodness, I like to think I'm a hard worker, and I've written 4 books. He's written how many?
37.
Yeah, that's That's superhuman. That's superhuman.
When he started the Freedom Center, it's a book a year. In some years he published 3 or 4. And again, each book by itself is something that when you read it, you say, how did he put all this together? That's how important they are. As an example, by the way, in the last year or 2 of his life, I'm just going to look quickly here. One of his books is titled Big Agenda. That's a big title, working title. President Trump's Plan to Save America. Now, this is before President Trump became elected. In other words, he was pushing for his election. The other one has to do with Take No Prisoners, Battle Plan for Defeating the Left, which is, again, all about the year or 2 just before President Trump became president. Another one I just wanted to make mention here is, bear with me. Okay, I can't put my fingers on the wall. Oh, yes, here. It's called Blitz. I mean, because you mentioned, Evan, this was so smart. Again, the reason I've asked Evan here is because he's smart. We love him. So this book is called Blitz. Everything is about battle, about war, recognizing we are fighting a war. This is not just, gee, we're on this side, they're on that side, and we'll play tennis. No, and then go to the Schwitz afterwards. This is really a war. So this book was called Blitz. Trump will smash the left and win. This is before November 2024. I want to read it again. The title is Blitz. Trump will smash the left and win. We're talking about now not just a great guy, and like you said, the strength of 1,000 men. He was a prophet. He really was.
Indeed, a prophet, a scholar, and also a worker bee. And you put those things together, and it's indomitable.
Yeah, I will say now. I'm going to say something personal, and I'd like if you have an anecdote. So I had the sincere privilege of knowing David almost on a friendly basis for about 2 years, because he came to the synagogue that I was at. So we were in the same synagogue together, and he came, in quotes, religiously when he could, because he wanted to feel his Judaism. He loved the fact that he was a Jew that could bring out the best of Judaism to a world that was thirsting for good values.
Indeed. And just look how far the man has come from communism, which is not only antithetical to, but it seeks to destroy the very concept of religion, and singles out Judaism, as do many wrongful ideologies, specifically because Judaism is the basis, the predicate for all of Western civilization. There is no Jesus without Judaism, right? There is no Western civilization without Judaism. And so, of course, it is always singled out by those who seek to destroy Western civilization and replace it. And what's interesting, I believe it was during your introduction, but you talked about how the far left, what David was warring against, and Islamic fascism are allied. And David's his organization, the Freedom Center, very much they have a thing, part of that called Jihad Watch. They have been very well aware of that for the longest time. You wonder to yourself, and even to this day, you see people marching down the street, queers for Palestine. And you're wondering, but the reason they're allied is because they're both utopian visions. Marxism and Islamicism both want to create the perfect world. Now, it's a very different world they want to create. But before they can create their utopia, they both have to destroy what is. And so they're allied in their hate for Western civilization. And this is something David recognized right from the very start. My friend Robert Spencer is his go-to guy, the president of Jihad Watch at David's Freedom Center.
Right. So I want to go back again to some anecdotes, and I will tell you two. One is that when David would come and be with us for the Sabbath services during Saturdays and such, he was able to, for want of a better term, let his hair down, because he wasn't asked to speak anything to anybody. He wasn't asked to talk about politics. He was there just as another person in the synagogue, just a regular guy. And I think that was one of the great attractions of it. Now, it was an interesting place, by the way. It was in Venice Beach, California, and we are the last or the first, depending on your viewpoint, synagogue in the United States of America. The continental United States of America is right on the boardwalk. And when you walk out of that synagogue, you walk onto a boardwalk in Venice Beach, which is quite eclectic, and you walk onto the sand. There's the Pacific Ocean. So when David would come, he was just a guy. That's all, and he would go out to people's tables and we'd eat lunch together and such, and just talking about life, not necessarily politics, even though politics was his life. So it was very human. He loved the ability to be with us together because it was the pressure was gone. And
indeed, I mean, in a way, that was his Sabbath,
yeah,
and the purpose.
He was able to have a Sabbath, a sabbatical, as it were, or to come whenever he could. And I'm happy to say, I'm going to mention his name. One of my dearest friends, his name is Judd McGillnick, who unfortunately has also passed away recently, within the past 2 years. Judd McGillnick became was on the board of directors of Freedom Center, a very close friend of mine, and a remarkably gifted human being in terms of communication and such, and very close with David and Michael ran the Freedom Center and such. And it's so important to understand that we're dealing with real human beings. In other words, you're looking at Evan, you're looking at me, say, okay, these are people. And David Horowitz took on the star power.
Yeah, and look, I lived and worked in Hollywood, and I understand that the image you must maintain, but at the same time you must maintain your own humanity. I mean, one of my favorite stories, and this is one of my favorite because it was so significant to me, is early on. When I was first recognizing just how evil the political left is. I mean, the death threats that come, the attempt to cancel you professionally, to intimidate your family. I mean, there's nothing that the political left, and I don't mean regular Democrats, we're talking the people on unfortunately who run the Democrat Party today. But there's nothing that they hold sacred, and there's nothing that they consider beyond the pale in their quest for power. And when I was first beginning to recognize this, and David was one of the first people I knew who was really a victim of it, a target of it, I said to him, David, how do you do it? How do you get up every day knowing what you know, seeing what you see, being bombarded by what you're bombarded by? How do you get out of bed? And he said to me one of the most sage things I've ever heard. He said, Evan, I always remind myself the future has never been what I thought it was going to be. And so I don't extrapolate what I think is going to happen. Because if I did, I could be darn nervous about Western civilization. I could be beyond nervous given that I've got kids and grandkids. But I don't extrapolate into the future because I don't know. So why suffer something that I don't know? I fight the fight that's in front of me. I live the life that God gave me, and there's nothing more I can do.
I want to encapsulate it in a 4-letter word. I like 4-letter words, by the way. Love, life, play, pray, swim, hope. David Horowitz was an exponent, without ever mentioning the word per se, of hope. And that's basically what you're mentioning now, Evan. And let's be blunt. David Horowitz was married several times. Everybody's a personality. I think 4 children at least, one of whom, by the way, is remarkable in the sense that David's parents were avowed, active, participating communists. David was that way for several decades of his life, was able to turn himself around, not just see the errors of his ways, turn himself around and become a beacon of freedom. One of his sons is one of the most interesting and important capitalists in the United States of America, a partner of one of the largest and most influential venture capitalist firms in the world.
Indeed.
So see this.
I wonder what Grandma and Grandpa would think.
Exactly. I mean, and I think that's part of the genius of America, the genius of what David has given birth to. And
there's one more thing that David recognized, and this is how we actually came to know each other. When I first began to recognize that there is, in fact, a culture war and that I'm on the right side, the politically right side. I had been on the wrong side. And I started to come over. I said to myself, what tool do I have? What weapon can I bring to this war? And I recognized we didn't have a Bill Maher for the right. We didn't have a Jon Stewart for the right. Well, I'd started out as a stand-up comedian. I'd actually written Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher for 6 years. And so I put together a stand-up act for the first time in 15 years. But this time it was pointedly to be a Bill Maher for the right. And I did my first show. I four-walled. I rented out the Friars Club in Hollywood and put on Evan Sayet's Right to Laugh, a night of conservative comedy. And the first night, David was there. And before I'd left the stage, he asked me to perform at one of his events because David always knew, and he had had comedians at other events prior. He always knew it's not good enough just to be a warrior. You have to be a happy warrior.
Oh, okay. Evan, if you've been listening thus far, you've just been rewarded. Because this is one of Andrew Breitbart's great lines. This is what Dennis Prager uses a lot. David Horowitz was the first exponent. And it's not enough to be a warrior. We need to be happy warriors. We are fighting the good fight, and we're doing it with all of our assets, unlike, by the way, the other side.
See, and there's a reason the other side. We fight to enjoy our life. They fight, that is their life. They don't have anything other than the fight, which is why they can't laugh at themselves, right? You watch their late night programs and they will never poke fun at themselves. They can't, because that would undermine. This is all they have, is this battle. And for us, we don't want to fight.
Right.
We would much rather not fight. We would rather go to a comedy show. We would rather go to a movie. We'd rather be home with our families, telling stories. And so if we lose the joy, if the fight becomes the joy, then you're living a very unhappy life.
You've been well rewarded if you've been listening and watching thus far. I want to mention one other person and then talk about the moment right now, because again, we're going to put this in context, because 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people will be watching, and hopefully it'll be a world that the Western civilization has been triumphant, in the sense that there are billions of people now living free lives and pursuing the ability to build businesses and families and grow economies and do good for themselves and other people. So a wonderful person, David Mamet, able to shift his perspective. And he is such a great spokesperson in using the written word.
And again, also important because he had been such an icon of the political left. He was one of theirs. And suddenly to have to go, and it was funny to watch when he published his coming out piece as he said, why I've left a brain dead, why I'm no longer a brain dead liberal. And what do you do at that point? How do you say this man's a genius, this man's a genius, this man's a Nazi?
We We used to love him. You know, read the article.
Right, I love him, but it happens all the time. You know, what do you think of Tammy Bruce, the lesbian feminist, former president of Now's largest chapter? Oh, I love her. Do you know she's now a Republican because she's a fascist?
Right. Again, we're laughing, and this show is all about David Horowitz. David would love this because his whole world, as you said, he had the strength of 1,000 men. His whole world and ability to get up in the morning was based on knowing, not just believing, knowing that we are in a fight that uses all of our attributes. And one of our great attributes, we're human. And the human condition can be looked at and laughed at. It's easy to cry also. Hello. You know, you look at it and say, are these people truly insane? They believe this? The answer, by the way, is yes, they are.
But one of my favorite quotes is, life is a comedy to those who think and a tragedy to those who feel. And if you can laugh at the absurdity of it all, then if you think about how absurd it all is, then you can laugh. If all you can do is feel, then all you can do, which is why, again, the left. And by the way, my next book is about why the political left is so unhappy.
So on that high note, we're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back with more Evan about David Horowitz and all the greatness that's happening in the world. Don't go. We'll be right back with this brief message.
What if you could shop at your favorite local stores, swipe your current credit card, and get extra cashback rewards? And what if you could also have donations sent to your favorite cause at no extra cost to you? What if this amazing program was absolutely free and very simple to set up? Well, What If is here. Welcome to Einstein Cares, where your everyday shopping gives you and your favorite cause extra money. It's fast, it's easy, and effortless.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people. Maybe good-looking is always looking for and finding the good. He found good in abundance. His name is Evan Sayet, and he's helping us understand what it means to be human and to be a happy warrior. And the greatest happy warrior that we've had in the past several decades, David Horowitz, who just left us this year. This is recorded in the year 2025. So if you're watching this 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now, you can laugh and say, wow, they really went through some stuff back then and we're going through it. So Evan, we're in a battle, and the battle is so now because look what's happening at this very moment. Again, 2025, you have the radical leftists from Columbia University. You have the radical leftists from Harvard University. Thank God President Donald J. Trump has done at least two things that nobody would have thought possible a year ago. One of them is that he was able to, through executive order, and now we're going to have it and legislate it into law, revive Title IX so that biological men will not be able to participate in female sports.
Right. And you were talking about they're going to look back and go, hey, really?
Right.
That was an issue?
Right. And when it started at University of Pennsylvania, and University of Pennsylvania just literally 2 weeks ago admitted their mistake, removed the trophies and that they gave to a biological man swimming against females, removed those, kicked him away where he should be, let him participate with males if he wants, and apologized. If you would put it in a novel or in a screenplay and submitted it, Evan, to a studio, I think they would have said, no, too far-fetched. That was one thing.
Well, one thing that a friend of mine had submitted a script to Hollywood, and it was very well. But they said you have to change the lead characters because it's not diverse enough. And so this true story had to be changed in order to get the right people. Well, flash forward, because, you know, it takes a while to get a movie made just because the studio commissions it or doesn't mean they. So 2, 3, 4 years later, they came back and said, you have to switch it back to the original people. Wokeism is dead. Wokeism
wait a minute.
is dead.
Words. We could conclude it right here. And it should be, as you just said, Evan, and David is hearing it from heaven. And wokeism is dead. It should literally be true. One of the other things, again, that I'm mentioning about President Donald J. Trump is that he is using the full power at the moment of the federal government and funding to make sure that Harvard University, which is also a truly noxious place that promotes not just anti-Semitism, but anti-Americanism, and it is a funnel through which these poisonous ideas are transferred into the body politic.
Indeed, and it's not a coincidence. I mean, everywhere you go, it doesn't matter what the issue is that they are protesting about, rioting over, whatever it is, wherever you see a leftist protest, you will see anti-Semitism, you will see pro-Palestinian, you will see, even though the issues are in no way related.
I want to make mention just of a couple of books. Actually, David wrote at least 2 or 3 books specifically about Israel and how important it is to, as you mentioned previously, Western civilization. You do not have the Judeo-Christian ethic without the Judeo part.
That's correct.
One of his books was, or is still, and it's really important to read, is called Why Israel is the Victim. That was one book. Another interesting and important book, and he talks about it often, is Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism is a very important and bedrock movement in the United States and should be throughout the world, mostly in the United States. And he wrote a book about a man named Pastor Charles Taze Russell, who was an early American Christian Zionist. David was fully aware that whenever people attacked Israel and Zionism, it was code word for America. It was code word for capitalism.
It was code word for Western civilization in its entirety. You know, I got to give my old boss, Bill Maher, some credit here. When Israel finally responded to those horrific attacks by Hamas on October 7th, and I think it was the New York Times published a piece about how Israel is the last outpost of Western imperialism, Western colonialism.
Right.
And Maher went through the list of all the things that Western civilization has given to the world, and it's everything good. It is democracy. It is trial by jury. It is universal human rights. It is the scientific method. It is literally everything that is good in humanity. And it just kills me that Maher wouldn't step over that line and see, well, what is it about Western civilization that gives us these things? What is the dominant ideology of Western civilization? And of course, it's Judeo-Christianity. And so it was good to see David Horowitz come from a godless upbringing. Not only godless, but
anti.
Yeah.
Godless is, there is no God in our world. This was purposely attacking.
Indeed. In my last book, which has a very long title, so I'll just call it The Atheist Origin Myth. It's about what I call the militant atheists. Those are people, atheism is a personal belief. Militant atheism is the conscious political effort to expunge belief in others. It is an attempt to expunge belief in God entirely from society. So yeah, David was raised a militant atheist, not just an atheist. And to see him go from that to a believer, to an activist believer, to a defender, to a champion of, That's a world of difference.
On a high note, because we're getting closing to our time together right now, two things happened just recently, and both of them happened just after David passed away. However, they are a tribute to him. One of them is a book by Ron Chernow. Ron Chernow is a remarkably gifted, prolific author as well. He writes 800-page tomes, so he doesn't write 34 of them. He's written about 6 or 7. But his latest one is about Mark Twain. And the reason I bring up Mark Twain is because Mark Twain, in his time, late 1800s, early 1900s, was the most famous American, not just American author. He was the most famous American in the world. It's amazing. You read this book, you realize, okay, we know Mark Twain, but he was.
I'm actually reading it even as we speak. It is the book on my nightstand.
Great read. Mark Twain was a philo-Semite. He liked and loved Jews. Matter of fact, one of his daughters married a Jewish man, and he was very happy about that.
But I'm going to let you in. I'm going to let you in on a little secret, Barry. Mark Twain is not his real name.
Right. Well, yes. For those who don't know around the world, yeah, you're right. Samuel Longhorn Clemens. Everything, by the way, everything we're talking about today is in the show notes. So you're going to have so much fun looking at this. The reason I mention is because Mark Twain penned one of the most remarkably interesting essays about the Jews. So it's worth it to do a search. And if it's not in the show notes, just do a search. Mark Twain on the Jews. The other thing is that it's rather short. There was a published essay by an imam in London who writes specifically in the opening word, says, I am an imam, I-M-A-M, which means, we'll call that a Muslim scholar. I am an imam, I am a descendant of Ishmael. I am a Muslim, and I am now going to talk about Israel. And he goes on to mention 5, 6, 7 things about Israel. The ability to have a 7-front war and defeat enemies. That wasn't his main point. His main point was, look at what's there. It's a country that is built as a democracy. It's a country, and as he said, to our shame, the only country in the world where Muslims have equal rights.
Indeed, they have more rights in Israel than they do in the Islamic country.
And
look, I make the argument, given how small a percentage of the population the Jewish people are, there's only, given how much they are hated, there's only 2 possibilities. Either they're hated because they are the worst people in the world, and you look around the globe, that's an impossibility given the horrors that are being committed in so many places, or they're hated because they're the best people in the world.
On this point that Evan's bringing up, this is the point of the imam. He's saying, in my humble opinion, it is a clear message that the Jewish people are blessed and they are a blessing. And by the way, that is a sentence from the Bible. I'm sorry. Bless Israel will be blessed. Those who curse Israel will be cursed. So on this, we're going to complete our time together.
Okay, but let me just go full circle, which is that people like David fighting the fight for Western civilization is fighting the fight it's much more than just your little town. It's much more than your state. It's much more even than your country. It's the future of the world. As goes Western civilization, so goes the world.
Okay, on that note, we're going to wish everybody the ability to listen to this again. Share it, please. I usually say share with 5 people. I'm going to say more today. Share this with 100 people. Yes, that's right. Use every number name on your list and share this, because this is so important. In honor of, in memory of David Horowitz. And again, I hope people will be listening to this a decade from now, half a century from now, a century from now. And it's really important because this is the year 2025. It's the 50th, the 250th anniversary of 1775, the shot heard around the world. David Horowitz, in my humble opinion, was the shot heard around the world. And now next year, coming up 2026, will be the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, 1776, and the greatness of the United States of America, which is the great beacon on the hill, as Ronald Reagan would say, our last best hope for humanity on this planet. And again, thank you, David Horowitz, for what you've been able to bring to us. Thank you, Evan, for being here and helping us understand more about the man. And for all of you listening, a blessing from Evan and Barry. Go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Evan, don't go away.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joy of Living podcast. Now that's another step towards your healthier, happier, and wealthier life. Never hesitate to do good in the world, no matter what the situation. Join us for another upbeat discussion next time at barryshore.com. And be sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show to get more conversations like this. And remember to share it with your family and friends too. See you on the next episode.